What's up, and welcome to episode 4 of the Emotional Bankroll podcast, a series where I interview DFS pros and talk to them about the highs and lows and lifestyle of playing DFS for a living. You may have the financial means to go pro, but you have the emotional bankroll to deal with the ups and downs. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, and in this episode, I talk with Neil Orfield, who you may know as Player Q on Twitter or ncorfield8k on FanDuel and DraftKings. Neil has a law degree, but last year he decided to leave his day job and jump into being a full-time DFS professional. So we talked about that transition and what that decision was like. We discussed the sweat and excitement of not only his first six-figure score, but his millionaire score and his most recent 300K victory since he went pro. We also talked about how quickly the doubt surfaces even after a big win. It's a great episode. We have future guests lined up, tons of high-profile DFS pros, so make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing here on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Go ahead and subscribe there. It's released everywhere. Give us a thumbs up if you like the episode or a 5-star rating in your podcast app. So, without further ado, let's talk to Neil. All right, let's bring him on the show. It's Neil, fellow Millie winner, and maybe more importantly, fellow Ballers holder. Neil, what's up, man? Welcome to the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I didn't realize that you were going to be a Ballers holder. I mean, I know now, I've seen your profile picture, but I didn't know that you were into NFTs until I saw the Baller profile picture. So pretty exciting. It's a fun little project.
It is a fun little project, and I'm barely in the NFT world. That was one of the first projects I fully dipped into. So once I saw a couple sharp people on it like you, I said, well, this makes my decision a lot easier. But we're not here to talk about NFTs. We're here to talk to Neil about his professional DFS career, why he got into it, his story, the mental aspect and the lifestyle aspect of being a DFS pro. And let's start with the fact that Neil recently jumped into being a DFS pro full-time very recently. So Neil, you tweeted back in September 2021 that you were quitting your job to become a full-time DFS professional. And I can say, obviously, winning a milli before that makes that decision a lot easier. But what was the mental math you were doing when you were making that decision?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd been pretty successful at DFS just for the past few years. I've been kind of making more money at DFS than I have at my day job. And I enjoyed the DFS a lot more. It's just something where you're kind of working for yourself. All of your hard work comes back to you. You know, the more work you put in, the more money you make out of it. So I was a lot more excited about it and wanted to do it more frequently. And then, yeah, like you said, obviously the Millie Maker helps kind of a lot in that math. You kind of feel like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can make money consistently. So yeah, just, having kind of consistent success for a little while and knowing that I enjoy it a lot more and knowing that just doing it kind of felt like I was doing two jobs at the same time. When I was doing DFS on top of my day job, it just felt like I was doing too much work, wasn't able to spend enough time with my wife and with my friends. So I kind of felt like it was kind of easy for me. Like it was a huge relief for me when I finally let go of my day job and just could focus on DFS full time.
You get that weight off your chest, right? Something you've been holding for a while, and you get to know. I totally understand that. And you say you've been successful for a while, and I think you mentioned on another interview, I think it was after you won the Millie on the Awesemo show, that you started playing a pretty long time ago in DFS. When did you increase your volume? Like before the Millie, right? When you started entering contests more and more, when you got to that volume level, what was that jump like? Was it gradual? Was it one big hit and then you jumped up?
It was largely one big hit and then I jumped up. I mean, it was gradual for a while. So I started playing kind of regularly in 2013, the basketball season. I just started playing NBA DFS to give me something to root for when I went to watch the Timberwolves with my brother. Because at the time, I wasn't really a basketball fan. I just kind of jumped into it. He wanted to get together, watch the Timberwolves sometimes. And I said, sure, I'll come watch. And then just to give me something to, more of a rooting interest, because I'd never really been a Wolves fan at that point. So I decided to start playing some DFS on those days and then kind of got hooked. And now I'm also a huge Wolves fan. So kind of got the combo. It's extra enjoyment on those nights when I go watch the Timberwolves of him. But yeah, so I started in 2013. And at the time I was just making a handful of lineups. And at the time it was also like the big tournaments were $2 per entry, $1 per entry on FanDuel in particular was really cheap at the time. Now, the big tournaments are $15. So yeah. I'm glad I did before it got to that point. But yeah, so I was just playing, $10, $15 at a time. And then gradually over time, I, played a little bit more when I kind of got to feeling like I knew the players, knew what I was doing. And then, obviously started doing other sports. Football, I always kind of felt like I knew a little bit better anyway. And then really, I ramped it up when I had my first six-figure win a year before the Millie. So I believe the Millie was 2020. Had my first six-figure win in October of 2019, and that really allowed me to. I joined Osmo, got the Osmo Plus subscription, so I kind of had all the access to the tools and the optimizer and stuff, which you can't really do 150 lineups without an optimizer. I would assume. I've never tried it,
It's difficult,
so just
probably.
yeah, being able to afford the optimizer and all the tools really allowed me to ramp up and start 150 maxing a lot more in 2019. And from there, I wasn't a full-time 150 maxer, but I was kind of I ebbed and flowed with how I was doing. If I was on a hot streak, I had 150 max everything, and then when I got colder, I'd kind of ramp it down to maybe 30, 40 entries. But yeah, that's kind of when I started playing a bit more, was when I had my first six-figure win in 2019.
What was that like? That six figure win. Everyone remembers their first big win, and six figures is a pretty large first win for someone. And obviously, it allowed you to ramp up your play a little bit. What was the emotions of that win? Was it pure excitement, and you thought you ran hot, or was it you were figuring that I put a lot of hard work into this and it's finally paid off?
Kind of both. So it felt unreal. Honestly, it felt totally surreal to me. I actually had tennis that night. I had doubles tennis with my brother-in-law was my partner, and tennis was at, I want to say, 7 o'clock, maybe it was 6 o'clock, and the last game of the night was running late, and it was an afternoon slate. So there was only one game left, and just the tiniest thing could ruin it. And it got to the point where I was up $100,000. The Cowboys scored a touchdown, and I was still hanging on for 100,000. They were down two with like a minute left, maybe not even a minute left. They go for two. And if they had gotten it, I was kind of done, because that meant somebody else would have to score, most likely. They didn't make the 2 point conversion, so I won $100,000. I go to tennis, and I was just like, the whole way there, I was like, is this a dream? Like, what is going on? I don't understand what's going on here. I get to tennis, and I kind of whisper to my brother-in-law. I was like, hey, I just won $100,000 playing DFS. And he immediately says, what? No, you're kidding. I said, no, yeah, I did. And then he shouts across the court to the guys across the court. And of course, there's like several courts around. Everyone here, he just won $100,000 playing DFS. Yeah, it was just a surreal night. Yeah, it felt like, I had been close several times. I had, felt like I was kind of due, like it was going to happen eventually. But it also felt like until it happens, it kind of feels like it can't happen for you, right? Like it's
Yes.
kind of like I've been close, but like there's some reason, there's something I can't quite get to that big hit. And I'd had, 5 figure hits before, but every time you kind of level up, the next level feels impossible until you get there. And then of course, once I'd done it, now it's happened several times since then. But that first one just feels impossible to get to. It feels like that's for people who have a ton of money who can 150 max. You can't do it until finally do. So yeah, it felt totally surreal. But yeah, I put in a lot of work. I'd been putting in a couple hours every day at least while doing my full-time job on top of it. So I felt like I'd put in the work, and obviously it paid off and felt good.
Hell yeah. And obviously, that's one of those let's refresh my phone 40 times before it hits my account
Yep.
type
Yep.
moments. So, yeah, know all about that. Let's go back to your job before DFS, before the pro DFS decision. How did you feel about that job in particular? And how did you approach the 9 to 5 life in general? Because just from your initial opening comment, you talked about the amount of work you put in isn't necessarily reflected in the amount you get back, which is something that speaks to me heavily. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts on just the 9 to 5 lifestyle in general for you, not for everyone, but just your personal thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I was not made for the 9 to 5 lifestyle, working for somebody else where I don't really kind of feel any reward. On top of it, so my last job, it was not a job that I was particularly well suited for. It was a job where I was reading legal cases all day and writing head notes, which are essentially Cliff's Notes. So it's a research platform for lawyers. I would read legal cases, and then I would write Cliff's Notes to make it easier for lawyers to find what they're looking for, the information that they need from a legal case more quickly. But I am a very slow reader, very slow writer, and it was a quota-based job. So it was like always a grind, and it was a monthly quota. So I was kind of always at the end of the month just putting in 12 hours a day for the last 3 days of the month trying to get there, and just on top of being extremely slow. It was not meant for me. And on top of that, it didn't pay all that well in terms of for somebody who had a law degree. Great benefits, and a lot of people take the job and love it, and it's their career job. But I think those are people who typically enjoy the job more than I did. And I didn't have the drive for that kind of work where there was no real payoff for me to see from working harder, except for maybe I'd get a slightly bigger raise kind of throughout the year. So it was not a job that I was meant to do, and I handled it poorly, to be honest with you. I rarely worked. I didn't do the 9 to 5 job is the answer to that question. I did the start working often at like 9 p.m. and finish working at 2 a.m. Was more likely for me. I'm also a pretty big night owl, so it just kind of made sense for me. My brain kind of works better in the evening, so it was not the healthiest situation for me to be doing that on top of DFS. And it was, yeah, a pretty big relief to stop doing that.
Yeah, so you're built for NBA DFS, huh? As a night owl, and League of
Yeah,
Legends
yeah,
too.
I
If
am.
if you dipped into those streets last
I
year.
have not started play. Yeah, I feel like everybody's been talking about League of Legends lately, so maybe it's something that I need to try at some point. But I have not dipped my toes into League of Legends yet.
So you mentioned the law degree, and this is something I want to talk about in depth. And there's obviously the sunk cost fallacy of you spent all this time and energy and money, I assume, getting this law degree, and now you're not using it in the traditional way. Does that ever cross your mind? Do you ever think about that?
Not in a negative way. Yeah, I don't care. It's I got the law degree because it seemed like the easiest thing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was, approaching. I was mid 20s at the time, so I'd been out of school for a few years, hadn't figured out what I wanted to do. I had kind of played around with the LSAT a little bit, and had done well on that. So it was kind of like, okay, I can do well on this test that'll allow me to get into pretty good law schools, better than probably I deserve based on my undergrad grades. So it was kind of like, yeah, this is an easy next step. And I thought I would go to law school and it would be easy to figure out what I want to do with the law degree once I went to law school. And that just wasn't the case. It seemed
Never.
like they basically gear you for, big law, which I was never going to do big law. That's the ultimate, like, you're just working your ass off and you don't really get the payout, at least for a long time. So yeah, I wasn't really meant to do law school. It's not something that I like. A lot of people go to law school and they grew up passionate about, like, I want to be a lawyer. I want to do this. I want to do that. I wasn't one of those people. I went to law school because it was kind of the easiest option for me at the time. And I thought maybe it would help me find direction, and it didn't. And after law school, I just kind of worked jobs that didn't pay well by comparison to other people who went to law school. And I had massive debt from going to law school. So I don't regret that I went necessarily because I made some good friends, but ultimately, I don't think it was probably the best decision for me at the time, and I have no regrets about leaving behind that life.
Well, that's good at least. At least you don't have any negative connotations with that. What was your undergrad degree?
English. I went to Tufts University. I got a degree in English. Again, I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. I came out of undergrad thinking that I was going to be a writer. I thought maybe like a fiction writer was kind of what I thought at the time,
Have you written
potentially.
any books or any novels or short stories or anything?
I have. I have not. I've written short stories mostly during my undergrad, but yeah, for a little while after that, I tried it and just I didn't really. Ultimately, I kind of decided, like, I don't know that I really have anything all that interesting, like all that unique to say, like, because once you start reading other people, you go into it thinking you have all these unique thoughts, and then you start reading all these other books, and for me at least, it was kind of like, okay, all these unique thoughts that I'm having have already been had. There's a lot of great writing out there, and I don't really feel like I have my own super unique story that I need to tell. So I think yeah, that's probably not going to happen for me. Maybe I'll get back into it because I did enjoy writing to some extent. Maybe I'll get back into it at some point, but yeah, right now that's not something that I'm thinking about doing in the near term.
Got you. So what was your passion, whether it's in high school, college, post college? Was there any jobs out there that you're like, oh, I definitely want that job, or I would love to do something like that? Or was this nothing really ever struck you? You were just trying to go from job to job or degree to degree just to figure out what you wanted?
So what's funny is one of the things that I've always been passionate about is fantasy sports. So it was yearly fantasy sports, even like back in college, in high school even. I started playing fantasy sports on a website called snap.com, which was quickly defunct. And I won a tournament of like 30,000 people in high school on this website, snap.com.
Wow.
And at the time you won by, I think it was baseball, and I just picked the players. It was like a weekly tournament. I picked the players who had the most games, and that was all it took to
It's all
say,
it
okay,
took back
these
in the
guys,
day.
they're good. Yeah, exactly. Back then it was so simple. And I like, so starting even back then, I was super passionate about fantasy sports, which is weird because I don't know why you should be you should be passionate about fantasy sports, but I've always loved it. And in college, I was on the cross country team, and we played a fantasy football league. I think my sophomore year, maybe my junior year, I was in a league and I won. And I talked so much trash that everybody else in the league, everybody else on the team wanted a shot at me. So the next year they had to create two leagues so that so that I would be in both of them and everybody would have a shot at taking me down.
Please tell me you
And
won
then I
both.
won both of,
Yes.
and then I won both of those leagues as well, on the back of Larry Johnson. Kansas City Chiefs. So yeah, I've
Stud back in the
always
day.
been pretty passionate about fantasy sports. So it's pretty natural for me to get into daily fantasy sports when I did in 2013. I had always played fantasy football, fantasy baseball. Honestly, I never got into really season-long fantasy basketball as much. It's basically just I'm in a couple leagues, and I'm kind of the bad manager who doesn't always update when he should
Yep.
in season-long fantasy basketball. So it's mostly DFS for basketball, but yeah, I've always been passionate about fantasy sports, so I'm really happy with where I've come. And it was always one of those things. I at the time it was in college in particular, it was Yahoo. I was always reading the articles on Yahoo, what they had to say about players and stuff. And I kind of even then, I think I in the back of my head kind of thought, man, it'd be really cool to have that job, just writing about fantasy sports. So pretty happy with the way my career has gone now.
Yeah, man, a lot of similarities between me and you, my friend. So you talk to a lot of DFS pros, and what's the background? Poker, math, some sort of analytics, coding, programming, something like that. Yours is English and law, but I think that's a completely different angle to take, not having that pure math background. Do you think that there are any skills or experiences from law school or your jobs that used your law degree that help you in DFS?
I think that thinking analytically is something that they kind of try to teach you in law school. I kind of think that I already sort of did. I think that's kind of why I got into law school. But if there is one thing, I guess the, kind of hammering home the how to think analytically, logically about a situation, maybe that kind of helped. But honestly, I don't think that it was a huge boon for me to go to law school and bring that to DFS. But I'm sure that there are people who benefit from that kind of schooling, and maybe I did more than I realize now. It's kind of one of those things you go to school, you don't realize all the things you're picking up while you're going. So maybe it did give me kind of a unique viewpoint, but I think that it's probably more of an edge to have kind of a math background than an English and law degree background, I would assume.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, oftentimes, and if not almost always, what you learn in college is less important than the process of learning how to learn and how to solve problems and how to critically think. And that's
Right.
what you just described, and that obviously helps in DFS. So, all right, let's go back to the decision, right? So you decide to go pro. What do your friends and family say? How does that conversation go with your wife?
Yeah, so I mean, with my wife in particular, it was several conversations. It was something that we had been talking about for a long time before we got to the point where we, both were comfortable with me quitting my job. The Millie Maker helped a ton. I think that was kind of that started the should we have serious talks about this? But a Millie Maker isn't really enough to retire on. I think a lot of people think if they win big, they can just quit their job and that's it, right into the sunset. A Millie Maker isn't really going to set you up for life. You kind of have to keep working after that. But, then I kept having success the following year, last year. So that made it a little bit easier to see like, okay, this is my third year in a row where at that point, had made more money in DFS than I had at my day job. So that really helped. Just being able to see like, okay, I'm not only consistently winning, but I'm consistently winning enough that I'm making more money doing this. And like I said, I kind of felt like I didn't have enough time to do both DFS to the extent that I wanted to and my job. So I think my friends and family were actually pretty happy that I was quitting my job. In general, it was I'm going to have more time to do things that with them, to spend more time with the people that I love. So it was a great decision for me, and I think everybody kind of saw that. There, obviously, I have some friends who kind of were taken by surprise, partially because we didn't really want to advertise the Millie. It was kind of we were in a weird spot where I won the Millie. We had already talked about. I had been like, I feel like I'm going to stop telling people that I win. So after I had won the 100,000, I told everybody I knew. I was like, I won $100,000, and then after a little while, I was like, I don't want to because then at some point it kind of feels like you're rubbing it in. So I had that conversation with my wife where I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to stop telling people when I win at things because I don't know, it just kind of felt gross, especially because the pandemic had just started.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, everybody's doing poorly. Like in general, people are losing their jobs. Was what we thought at least. So it was like, yeah, I'm not going to advertise this anymore. But then of course I win the Millie, and I'm in this situation where I'm like, okay, this is something where I might be able to actually change my career path. So like the Osmo team asked me if I wanted to do an interview, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to get some exposure here, and possibly get into the DFS world. And that was sort of a tricky balance of like, okay, we're not telling my friends and family, but I'm also doing an interview that's on YouTube. And then of course people find out because they started advertising it like, hey, posting the video, I had some work friends who found it on LinkedIn. They saw an advertisement
Oh,
to Awesemo on LinkedIn. They must have tagged me or something. I don't really use LinkedIn that much,
mm.
but my work friends found this video saying that I had won $1 million. They're like, "Is this real, Neil?"
No, it's
Like,
fake. No, don't
so
worry about
so
it.
people were finding out. Yeah. So I have a few friends that now still don't know that I won the millie or that I've made that you can really. I think I have some friends who don't really know that you can win a lot of money in DFS, and they're the ones who are more like, oh, okay, well that's sounds fun. We were just on a call with some of my friends from college, and one of my friends said, okay, well I guess Lisa's the one. She's just gonna have to accept that she's making the money now, or made some comment about how my wife's gonna have to make all the money now, and we're just
Well,
kind of like, yeah,
yeah, sure.
it's yeah. So it's easier for people to understand if they know that you've won the millie. Then it's like, okay, yeah, it makes sense that you would go full time.
Right.
If they don't know that you can make serious money, then they don't totally understand, and I don't really get into it.
Right. I mean, it's tough, dude, because like if you just imagine any other industry where whether it's your hobby or your full-time job and you reach the pinnacle, the millie I think a lot of people would say is the pinnacle of a DFS accomplishment, right? If you reach the pinnacle accomplishment in any other hobby, any other industry, you'd be thrilled to tell people and just be proud of what you've done. But because we measure our success and our accomplishments in dollars, it feels a lot grosser to brag, and not even bragging, but just be
Mhm.
proud of what you've done to other people. And I agree, it is a tough balance mentally to try to be proud of what you've done, but also try not to rub it in people's faces, especially during these times.
And then on top of that, it's the people kind of feel like it's a lottery. Like some people
Yeah,
just think that DFS is essentially a lottery ticket. They don't see the skill involved. They think it's all just luck. So,
sure.
people think, oh, you just got super lucky and you just got super lucky. You keep getting super lucky. You don't really want to bring that into your world, that kind of thought process. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons that it's just not as fun to talk about as, success in other areas of life.
For sure. So when you meet new people, you're out. I mean, you're a DFS pro, and I make this joke all the time. But assuming you actually leave your house and meet new people, what do you tell them you do when they ask, "Oh, hey Neil, what do you do for a living?"
So I usually am a pretty social person. I like to leave my house, but currently we're in the middle of a pandemic where it's gotten kind of weird. Especially since I quit my job in September. During the summer when we could go outside, we were out and about a lot more.
Sure.
Um, it's sort of I guess not a very busy time for me. Since I quit my job, I haven't actually had as many social interactions as if I had done so in like the spring when I'm on a softball team or
Right.
other times of the year. I feel like this is kind of a downtime where the only people I've seen really are family and close friends, and I haven't really had to explain to them, what I'm doing. They kind of understand what the job is, and yeah, I haven't really needed to describe it to people
Cool.
how it all works.
All right. So one final question about this decision is DFS has been around for nearly 10 years now. And you jumped into the DFS full-time career during a time where, to me, and maybe this is availability bias, right? Because I'm in the industry and I'm talking to people, but where it feels like more high volume players are either decreasing their play or leaving entirely to start other endeavors, crypto, NFTs, content creation, versus more players coming in. Obviously, we have like the Whistles Go Woo, Nerdy Tenor, those types of people coming in. But do you ever think about that? Obviously, the game has changed so much in 10 years that it's pretty sharp now compared to where it was when it first started, that maybe you're getting in this too late full time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern. I definitely think about it. It's not a major concern for me. I kind of think there's always going to be an edge. You just think there's always going to be enough people that want to play that don't really have any idea what they're doing that are going to pay the rake for you, right? So I think 15% rake. I think there's always going to be more than 15% of just bad lineups in any contest.
Sure.
But yeah, it's definitely a concern that it's getting harder. In general, I feel like I've done well enough the past couple years that I'm not really feeling it yet. But I was just listening to the Lowell's podcast last night with Brick75, and he was saying that he wouldn't really recommend that new players get into DFS right now necessarily. He was kind of caused me some doubt talking about how the edge is kind of going away with people like Awesemo putting out stuff that's just available. You can use all of this publicly available data that even, a lot of players can make good lineups just based on using the publicly available data. So that does take away some edge. But I think it also, with the publicly available data, it adds to a little bit more groupthink. So I think that there is opportunities. There's still edge if you're willing to think outside the box and kind of go against the data in some spots. Pick and choose your spots where it makes sense. So I'm not that concerned yet, but yeah, it's definitely something that I'm always going to be kind of watching my roto tracker, seeing if I'm still putting enough lineups into the top 1% of the field, the top 0.1% of the field, making sure that I'm getting close still. Because yeah, otherwise it definitely brings in doubts when you have losing streaks, when you go on a cold spell. So you kind of need to track that stuff to make sure you're still playing well. And currently, I still think we've got some time left. But yeah, especially with sports betting, becoming a thing everywhere, maybe a lot more casual players are going to go to sports betting rather than DFS. So it's definitely possible that that we lose that edge, which is also part of the reason that I thought it was important to quit my job when I did, to kind of focus on DFS while there still is edge, because who knows how much longer we're going to have it.
Right. And I asked that question specifically because we had Brick on the second episode of this podcast and he was talking about that. But whereas last episode we had Alex on, Osimo, and he was thinking that maybe it goes the other way. Maybe that all this sports betting legalization brings more people in who have never played DFS before instead of the natural conversion that most people think of DFS to sports betting. Hell, maybe we get people signing up for sports betting and then coming over to DFS. We never know. So I kind of agree with you. I think there always will be an edge though.
Yeah, in general, I think that they're and people leaving, that's not really a concern for me. Maybe they're great players that are leaving. I don't really know. Maybe they were completely projections based and they didn't have a lot of game theory to their process. And I don't know. I'm not making this claim about anybody. I'm not trying to trash talk here. I'm just saying that things change and you got to adjust with the times. And if people are not able to adjust, then maybe those are the players that aren't going to continue playing. And also, like you said, with NFTs and stuff, people are just making a killing on NFTs. So I think a lot of people are just like, what's the point of playing DFS? It's so easy to just buy this thing for 0.05 ETH and then sell it for 5 ETH, 2 weeks later. So I think that might be part of the reason there's been an exodus as well.
Exactly, exactly. I didn't expect you to call out projections donkeys, but I'm glad you did. So, well, that's on the record. All right. Let's go back to after you make the decision, right? September 3rd, 2021. You tweet out, "I'm quitting my job, super happy, etc." All the good stuff, right? Then, in just like you couldn't write a story any better. October 4th, that's literally a month later. You bank an NFL Showdown GPP. I think it's a three-way chop for 299K. So you quit your job. All this goes into a decision, and then immediately it's validated with a $299,000 win. Did that cause you to immediately think like, well, yep, I made the right decision, or were you? I mean, to me, you seem like a level-headed guy. Was it tough not to be super pumped about that decision right after that?
Yeah, so I've had people ask me within the past couple months, do you have any regrets about quitting your job? And I'm like, of course I don't have any regrets about quitting my job because I won immediately after. It was funny because at the time I quit my job, it wasn't after a big win. I was on a pretty big downswing at that point. August was maybe my worst month of all time. I had one winning day in all of August playing MLB DFS, and it had been a great MLB DFS season for me up until that point. And then August came, and I just couldn't win anything. Like I said, just one winning day in all of August. Every 30 of the 31 days were losing days for me, and then that continued into September. So at the time I quit my job, I was actually on a pretty big downswing, which was, obviously caused me to have some doubts at that time. Even I think people don't realize, at least for me, I can have a big win, and if I don't win for a week, I'll start having some doubts. Like even if I won $100,000, I can start having doubts maybe even a few days later if I just have a few really bad days. Typically it's a little bit longer than that before I start doubting myself. But yeah, so I was having some doubts at the time. Actually, I won a 100,000. I had a maybe 13-way bink September 16th. So even sooner after I quit my
Oh,
job.
excuse me, Neil. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it was that, and then 3 weeks later I had the 300,000, both in showdown. It takes some luck to win in showdown for sure. I mean, it takes some luck to win anything, but it definitely helped a lot to have that quick validation after what had been month and a half long losing streak at the point of my first $100,000 win. And then obviously the 300,000, that's kind of an anomaly. You can't really expect that every year. So that was pretty nice to get, and definitely made me feel a lot better about the decision for sure.
Absolutely. All right, let's dive more into this downswing. This is what a lot of people are here for. They want to see the pain, first of all, but also I want to dive in and just get the mentality of when these downswings happen. So the initial question I wrote down for this agenda was how you had a significant downswing since turning pro, but I think we might as well talk about this downswing right before because 30 of 31, most people might think, dude, why the hell are you leaving your job after losing 30 of 31 days? But if you play GPPs, especially for a living, you know that that type of outcome is possible. And you talk about the doubt, which is super real. And I think a casual player might have some doubt after two losing nights, right? No, I'm not good at this. But I mean, you just said a week, right? And I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of, especially seeing someone like you who's had so much success. That guy probably has no self doubt, right? Like he wins all the time. There's no way he ever questions this process. And I think even guys like Osimo, they're like, oh, he's a machine. He never thinks about it. But he talked about last episode, he has self doubt too. So what do you do when that self doubt creeps in? Like, how do you handle that? how do you check yourself to try to keep a level head that, hey, I do have an edge here. I just need to understand that this is variance or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so I mean, check in your roto tracker. Make sure you look at your results. I think that's something that I have to do to be like, okay, I'm still on the right track. I'm still putting lineups in the right vicinity of where they need to be. I just haven't gotten lucky in a little while. And I honestly, I'm on a pretty big losing streak right now. I haven't had a big win in a
Okay.
while. So yeah, the self-doubt definitely creeps in. And it's funny because just need like if something goes my way, if something goes your way, suddenly you're on top of the world. You feel great. Oh yeah, I'm still like doing great at this. And then I
All
just
that doubt
tweeted about this.
disappears, right? All right, like it's all gone
Yeah,
immediately.
I just tweeted about this the other day. Like I had a lineup that I thought was really live to win $100,000 a couple days ago, and then ended up winning 700 because things didn't go the way I needed them to at the end. Of course, if they had gone my way, right now I'd be hell yeah, I'm great at this. Like I'm the best DFS pro. I'm doing great. And now I'm like, man, I'm on such a big losing streak. Like what is going on? I can't win anything right now. So yeah, I definitely have doubts all the time, and it doesn't take that long for me after a big win to start having those doubts again. You know, after your big win, you assume you're going to win again the next day, right? I win 100,000. I'm like the next day, I'm like, all right, I'm going to fire a few more bullets. I'm going to play in
Hmm.
the $1,000 contest maybe, or the 500, whatever is available that day. I'm going to play the expensive contest, and it's only 600 people. I can win that easily. And then of
I
course
just beat 50,000 people. I could definitely beat 600 people,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly. And then I come in, 555th out of 600 in that tournament. So yeah, I definitely I have a ton of self doubt when I'm not on a winning streak, when I'm not winning a lot of money, and yeah, you start wondering, has the field adapted? Did I just get lucky? Have I gotten lucky this many times now? Like even now, I'm like, man, I've won a lot, and I'm still like, there's still, and it's a very very small part of me at this point that thinks like I just got lucky that many times. It would kind of seem like an anomaly,
Sure.
but yeah, you definitely it's hard not to have those doubts to think maybe the field is catching up, maybe you've changed something for the worse. I definitely have those doubts every time I go on a downswing, and typically for me, so people talk about like bankroll management. For me, I just decrease how much I play on a downswing. I mean, I still 150 max, but I just, if I'm really on a big downswing, I will only 150 max the big tournaments on FanDuel and DraftKings, and I won't add anything else onto it. If I'm on a winning streak, then I'll play a little bit more. So yeah, it's tough, and you just gotta keep in mind your history. Keep in mind that a month is not a long time. You gotta think about the bigger picture, how you've done overall. And for me, I check my roto tracker some of the times. I say that I don't do it that much. Typically on a
Only after
downswing, I
wins,
don't
right?
want to check. Yeah, exactly. Typically only after wins. I probably should be checking more after losses to see, okay, have I actually been putting enough in that top 1% bucket? Have I not been playing well, or am I just getting unlucky? But mostly, yeah, I really do only check it after wins. So
Just to that point, I talked to a pro recently who was on a downswing, and they checked their roto tracker results just to see if there was something that they were missing, right? Is it just pure variance? Is something else? And they found that these contests in this specific sport of this dollar amount or higher, they've lost 37 straight, haven't cashed in 37 straight. And that seems more like a leak in the process than pure bad luck to not cash 37 times. So they dove in and found something was wrong with that and was able to adjust it. So to your point, it really is important to check it no matter how down that chart looks in Roto Tracker to maybe try to find something that you're missing, especially as you're doing the day to day and you miss all the details.
right. Yeah, it is. It's definitely important, and that's something that I talked about recently with Jordan Cooper. Is that I checked that on my roto tracker. I finally, for the first time, looked at my results on like $50 and higher or $50 and lower, and I've lost money overall in contests that are $50 or higher, and I've just I've won obviously in the contests that are $50 and lower. So it's a question of, do I need to stop playing those higher dollar contests, or do I need to just change how I'm playing? And yeah, it's definitely important to always look at those kind of results and figure out, am I on the right track here, or do I need to make some kind of change?
Yeah, for sure. And I probably know the answer to this question, right? But money aside, not including any financial aspects, but the ups and downs, the swings, the self doubt, is that all overridden by the fact that you get to do what you love and create your own schedule when it comes to doing this full time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it is for sure. If I go on a big enough downswing where I lose for a year, if I have a losing year, then I might get to a point where it weighs on me enough that it's not worth it. But currently, if I can keep winning, just profit some, even if I don't have a massively profitable year, I think it'll be worth it for me because I enjoy it. I get to spend more time not working, and it was just too much stress for me to do DFS on top of my regular job. So yeah, I think it's all worth it for me, because I do enjoy it. Obviously, you enjoy it a lot more when you're winning than when you're losing. So that's the reason that I'm like, yeah, right now I really enjoy it and I think it's all worth it. But that's also because I've been pretty successful the past few years. And if I start losing, which is something that's always a concern, then maybe it won't be worth it for me to play anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned, looking at your rotor tracker, but are there any other tips you have for people out there listening to this that they're in a down streak or they're just a losing player? And in your daily process, is there something you can do, anything that can help you to continue or start to make plus EV decisions when you're facing this massive downswing, aside from just looking at your results and telling you that yes, you've been losing?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of work. I think is the biggest advice I can give is it took me several years of losing before I really started winning consistently. And I say consistently, I don't win. It's not like I win every day. Keep in mind that even the pros, even the best players in the world, even the Alex Baker types can lose for, I think, can lose for a month straight. Like even the best players in the world can
For
lose
sure.
for a long time. So just keep in mind that, especially if you're only playing a few lineups, that just extends the amount of time that you can go without really winning. Like if you're only playing 10 lineups, it's going to take you a long time, even if you're a great player, to realize your edge and have a huge win, because you're not getting 150 lineups in there to kind of realize your EV. And if you're not a winning player, if you're not playing plus EV lineups, just keep studying, just keep listening to the podcasts. And I listen to podcasts every single day, just about. I'm always listening to what other people have to say, and even if it's a slate that I don't necessarily learn anything about the individual plays that they're talking about, I still feel like it's helpful to just listen to the way good players talk about playing DFS. And I think it's important to also listen to good players in particular. There are a lot of touts out there, and some of them don't really play DFS. And I would generally recommend listening to people who are winning DFS players, because I think that typically that's the best way to learn, is just keep your head to the ground. Am I using that terminology right? Just keep working
Sounds
hard
right.
is,
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to get to. Yeah. For me, it was several years of playing and working hard, listening to videos, reading content. Just do whatever you can, whatever your preferred medium is. There's a lot of good content out there that you can kind of help you learn how to become a good DFS player.
Yeah, head to the ground, whatever it's called. I mean, I wouldn't expect you to know any idioms. You're not like an English major or anything. So I think we're
I'm
good.
terrible with idioms. I feel like, especially, I actually, you mentioned my interview with Osimo, my first interview. I had a couple in there that were completely wrong. So you put the spotlight on me, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, didn't go well.
That's awesome. All right, so how do you balance this lifestyle? And to me, it seems like it's almost similar to what you were doing, before turning pro, when you were doing both at the same time. But even that job you had, where you kind of have these weird hours, you're sitting a lot, you're reading a lot, you're on devices a lot. What resources or exercises do you do to balance that? Do you meditate, mental health acknowledgement, mindfulness, physical exercise, yoga, anything like that?
Currently, not really is sadly my answer. I don't think that I have the most balanced lifestyle at the moment. It doesn't help that it's winter in Minnesota, and I mean, typically in the spring and the fall, I'm on a softball team every spring. Historically, I've done tennis. That kind of the league got ended with the pandemic. I think it's actually back now, so maybe I'll play tennis next year. Typically, for me, it's physical exercise kind of helps me to stay mentally sharp and kind of balance my life. I have a pretty active social life in general. Usually, I will be going to trivia most Tuesday nights, even though I'm terrible at it. It's not a strength of mine. I still enjoy it. We do Zoom calls with friends, do plenty of things to kind of balance out my life, have a good time. But yeah, probably not as much as I need. I don't really do any meditation. It's something my wife and I did for a little while, like maybe 5 years back. We would go to meditation center,
Hmm.
and that was kind of nice in a way. But it's tough because it was at like 7 p.m. It's like, yeah, there's just no way you could do that now,
Zero.
during basketball season in particular. I can't be doing anything really to take me where I have to leave my phone for an hour. It
Right.
doesn't really work.
That was my next question, actually. So how does, and not to get all couples therapy on you, but like, how does your DFS schedule fit with your wife's schedule?
Yeah, I mean, she has a typical 9 to 5, so it's not ideal. It's tough around dinner time in particular, figuring out when we're going to eat. And typically, I will come down and try to help with dinner, and we try to eat at I guess it'd be 7:30 Eastern time. But then a lot of time I do have to run back up. Oh, this player's out unexpectedly. I need to go change my lineups, and that's just, just kind of something that you have to accept as an NBA DFS player. If you want to maintain an edge, you have to be making changes when news comes out. So there's really no way to avoid it.
And it sounds like your wife is understanding of that. And I will
Yeah,
always say that winning a millie will up that understanding level by
yeah,
a wide margin compared to someone who just plays this casually and you're trying to tell your girlfriend, I need to change these DFS lineups and you just lose money. Whereas if you've won the millie
yep,
before, I think they'll understand, okay, maybe he needs to make this change for real.
yep. I think that is exactly right. It helps to win, and especially when you've done it for a few years, I think it's yeah, you kind of earn that understanding.
For sure. In your interview with Alex that you just talked about, you said when you won the millie, your wife was actually included in the sweat with you. You were talking about she was actually comforting you at some points. How often do you discuss the details of your DFS, whether it's the play in the sweats or just the pure results with her?
Not that often. More frequently now. Now that I'm doing it professionally, I'll tell her more about the things that happen, and that's just something that she's been more interested recently. So I tell her more. Up until the Millie was really the first time I think that I have really included her in a sweat, and it was just. It's like I think I have a real just looking at my lineup. I was like, man, this lineup looks incredible right now. I think that I have a real shot at winning $1 million. So that was the first time, especially we got to a point where there was like half an hour straight where I needed one 6 yard catch
The
to get
longest
me
30 minutes of your
100.
life.
It was terrible. I needed, and part of it, and it was the fourth quarter and overtime. So it was like
Oh,
really
God.
lucky that it went to overtime for me.
Right.
Yeah, that was the biggest heart thumping. And she was there, trying to calm me down, and I'm like, I cannot be calmed down right now. So it was tough, but then fun when I won. Fun that she was included and we got to celebrate together.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
That,
typically not a ton. I don't really always tell her about the sweats that I have going on.
yeah, that's probably for the best, honestly. And so you mentioned, so obviously you sweated that millie, right? That football slate. Which sports do you watch on a consistent basis, and how often are you watching and sweating your GPPs?
So football, I'll watch basically all day on Sunday if I can. Obviously, there are some Sundays that I can't, but I watch, Thursday night football, Monday night football, all day Sunday. I watch as much football as I can. And then basketball, typically I'll watch 1 or 2 games a week. Try to watch more than that, but it's definitely football is the one that I watch the most. Usually I'll be going to my brother's house once a week for basketball. I'm this year I actually have I split season tickets 4 ways to the Timberwolves, so trying to get to more games.
Cool.
But yeah, I still don't get to watch as much basketball as I would like. I think at some point I'm going to get NBA TV or figure out some way to just have access to a little. The real struggle for me right now is that we don't even have cable. We just have like the basic free television show
Right.
channels, and there's not a lot of basketball on there, so I don't get to watch as much basketball as I would like unless I go over to my brother's house to watch.
Got you. Yeah, that makes sense. And it feels to me like a lot of the DFS pros, some don't watch at all. Some watch everything,
Yep.
and it feels like to me like there's a direct correlation. If you came up on fantasy football, you're probably watching the football sweats on Sundays every time.
Yep. It's the most fun, I think, to watch. It's so event based. It's just I really enjoy watching, and I like watching football in general. Even I've seen a lot of people talking about how terrible the product is this year, and I get it. It would be terrible for me if I didn't just love Showdown so much that it's like every little shitty play kind of matters.
That's for sure. And the product has been terrible, but again, if you have money on it, then any product's going to be fine when you watch it. So,
Exactly.
all right, Neil. So this has been very enlightening. Appreciate you peeling back the onion. I mean, I don't even know if you know that's an idiom or not. I don't even know if I used it right. We'll never know. But let's
Sounds
get you
good.
out of here and some final advice for people listening because as I close out all of these episodes, I always say that people always ask me every month, Brian, I want to be a DFS pro. How do I do that? What's the best way to do it? How do I get there? So for you, Neil, what do you think is the number one skill someone has to have in order to do this full time to be a DFS pro?
I mean, I think you kind of have to have an analytical brain. You have to be able to think for yourself to some extent, and you have to be a little bit fearless. I think part of it is just sometimes you have to accept that you're going to lose money. You're going to have to make some bets that are unlikely to pan out, and those are the bets that often have the biggest rewards. So I think being able to take on some risk tolerance, having somewhat of an analytical brain helps kind of a lot, and just working hard at it. You need to make adjustments. If you're not winning, you need to be always thinking about what can I change in my game to get better? What am I not doing well enough? Am I not taking enough risks? Am I taking on too much risk? People go that way too. Some people take on, they're playing all 1 to 5% owned guys on a football slate, and you really don't need that. That's not typically how you're going to win. So you kind of need to keep adjusting, and I would say also studying what pros do, if you can. There are a lot of different ways to do it. I do it in lineup study on Fantasy Cruncher, but I know that Roto Grinders has a way to do it as well. I think there are several ways to do it out there. I think that it's important to kind of look at what the best players are doing and think about, do I need to adjust to be more similar to those players? But ultimately, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of, you need to be experienced. I wouldn't expect most players to win right away. There's not a lot of whistles go woos out there. I think most players, it takes some time to kind of figure out what you're doing, get a feel for it.
Absolutely. Very well said. So if you want to be a DFS pro, take all that advice, listen to Neil, and go do it. So, Neil, I appreciate you joining, man. I'll give you the floor. Any last words of advice? Anything you want to plug? Any final words here?
Yeah, so I will be hosting my own show. The first time I'm ever going to be hosting a show on Awesemo, starting, I believe, February 4th is the date we have in mind. I'll be doing an interview with Alex Baker. The current name for it, we're calling it High Stakes with Neil Orfield. We'll see if that changes, but I will also be interviewing DFS personalities and pros, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So check that out. Hopefully, I can have you on sometime, Brian.
Absolutely. I would love to join. So for Neil, appreciate you listening to the Emotional Bankroll podcast. We'll talk to you soon.